Laura Molen is coming up next, but I have a little special treat for Laura because we had this really awesome podcast. You know, Laura was the president of NBCUniversal, and her franchise, one of many, was The Real Housewives. And she talked about, with such passion, this Lay's potato chip partnership. So I made my own recipe for Laura, which is, this is Laura's Get Uncomfortable Lay's remix. 1 big bag of Lay's, 3 Real Housewives level swirls of drama, a pinch of Peacock pressure, a heaping scoop of AI and ad innovation, 25 years of media leadership heat. Instructions: start with classic Lay's, add bold ideas when the future looks uncertain, mix in partnerships, new tech, and fearless point of view, serve while things are changing nonstop. Results: extra crunchy conviction, teams that thrive in discomfort, leaders who turn chaos into competitive advantage. Thank you. Welcome, Laura.
Hi, everyone. That's so funny. I mean, basically, Heather just gave my whole presentation, but so I'm going to talk about getting comfortable being uncomfortable today, because I bet nearly every leader in this room is facing the same uncomfortable truth. And that is, what happens when the rules that helped you create your success no longer apply? And that's really where we are right now. The rules no longer apply, so you could throw out your rule book, because we're in a time where technology is moving faster than strategy. Consumers are shifting their behavior before we can even track it, and certainty, well, certainty is a luxury item that most people can't afford. So what do you do when you're uncomfortable? And I'm a living example of that today, right? I'm getting up here and I'm being comfortable being uncomfortable. So if you're feeling uneasy, that's not failure, that's the new normal. But I would ask you to actually try this on. What if your discomfort was an invitation to actually grow? Because today's leadership actually lives in disruption all of the time, and I would argue that being comfortable being uncomfortable is the new normal for today's leaders. So when I started my career, I wanted to work in cable, and I'm going to share a bunch of stories with you. So this is one of the stories about disruption throughout my career and what I've learned. I wanted to start in cable, and I started an ad agency, and this senior leader executive said, "Cable is dying." Now you know how old I am, by the way. And broadcast television is the future. And I was like, really? Because me and all of my friends, we love our cable brands. We identify with them. And I saw that culture was fragmenting and remixing, and consumers were moving and changing, but it was obvious to me that companies weren't moving that fast. They weren't following. And so this pattern of consumers moving first, enabled by technology, and then if you happen to be one who sees it and moves early, those are the ones that usually succeed. And I'm going to share, a lot about different stories where I've led through disruption, whether it was launching Peacock or moving cable brands from cable to fandom and Bravo and E, or helping brands take risks. I'm going to share these stories and show you that disruption is continuous, but there are things I've learned that help me lead through these times. So I'm going to start with Peacock. When we were launching Peacock, it wasn't whether or not we should launch a streamer and be successful, because streaming was the future of video. But it was aligning our teams about how we were going to approach the marketplace that was really difficult. We decided that we were only going to launch with 10 partners, and this was very disruptive to my teams. Netflix, HBO Max, they were coming out with an ad product. Hulu was already a successful streamer with ads. So my team was asking, why are we launching in a competitive marketplace? And why are we asking only 10 partners, and then we're also charging them a lot? How will this work? And I quickly saw that if your teams don't believe and they're not aligned, you are not going to disrupt, you are not going to move. So I help my teams see a vision, see a North Star. I told them what an opportunity to be one of these 10 marketers that are gonna sit on an ad council, and we're gonna hear back from consumers, we're gonna listen to our marketers, and we're gonna create a new ad experience in streaming, one that consumers will actually love. Because these marketers, these 10 partners, they're gonna work with us and our consumers, and they're gonna create the future of streaming for advertising. Well, that shifted my teams. They quickly bought in and believed, and our customers felt it. They bought in too. And so what I saw is that you must align your teams around belief, because belief creates confidence. Confidence creates growth. Growth drives momentum, and momentum ultimately gets to success. So you must align in order to disrupt. So now I'm going to take you to someplace different, a story that Heather shared a little bit with. Fandom. Bravo and E, we didn't just follow technology to follow technology. We went to the social platforms because we saw that's where our fans were going in droves. They wanted to post about our shows and our content. They were defining themselves as Bravoholics in their bios. They were creating social communities around our shows and our content. And so rather than fight it, we put our content everywhere our consumer was. We partnered with Twitter, we partnered with Instagram and with TikTok, and just threw our content. And it worked, because E no longer just covered red carpets. E became the cultural global conversation around red carpets. And Bravo was no longer just Real Housewives and television shows. We built BravoCon, and BravoCon, for those of you in the event space, is a huge place where fans go to experience Bravo live, and it has become hugely successful. And one of my favorite stories that Heather shared a little bit about was with a marketer, Lay's, where we, at BravoCon, created a Bravo-inspired Lay's chip with a celebrity chef, and we brought it to BravoCon, and there was even the sprinkle Lay's potato chip, and if you watch The Real Housewives of New Jersey, you know what I'm talking about. And fans went crazy. It was everywhere, and as a matter of fact, it trended at the top of what was Twitter at the time against a major night of the World Series. And I was screaming and jumping in joy for my advertiser for Lay's, because they took a chance. It was the first BravoCon, and they were hugely successful. So now I'm going to take you someplace else. I'm going to talk about risk. So when the UFC first emerged, advertisers wanted no part of it. They said it was too controversial. They told me it was too raw, too unproven. And so Dana White, the president of the UFC, asked me and my colleague if we would go to Vegas and see a fight and see if we couldn't help change the narrative with advertisers. And when I got to Vegas, I didn't see raw, I didn't see controversial. What I saw was deeply loyal, passionate fans leaning in. And these fans happened to be young, affluent men who were, and still are, very hard to reach, a fragmented audience, and marketers wanted them, but they just couldn't get to them. So we changed the narrative from fear to passion. And Burger King was one of the first marketers, mainstream marketers, to move and join the UFC. And that's right, we put the actual Burger King king, and I'm sure many of you remember that king, on the UFC mat, and it went viral. And this was the beginning when things would go viral. Remember, like hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube? Fans went crazy for it. Burger King was hugely successful. The king was everywhere then, and the UFC moved to the mainstream. So what's the lesson here? The lesson here is, do not wait for something to be polished, because if you wait, you may miss it. Trust your instincts, look at the data, and then move early, because those who do, they usually succeed. And so now I come to today, and AI. Many of my clients, they ask me questions about AI like, how can I save money using AI? How can I cut my team using AI? AI is threatening my business. And these questions are often very controversial. I mean, not controversial, fearful. They're based on fear. And fear contracts, and curiosity creates reinvention. So I use a formula with my clients. I say, AI plus curiosity equals evolution for your business. Because you can sit in fear and watch your business contract, or you can get curious and ask questions like, what can I do with AI to grow my business? What are my consumers doing with AI? Where is AI moving towards in places that I think my business can go to? Those are the kinds of questions for leaders that will succeed. So I go back to my original question when I first started. What do you do when the rules that helped you get to where you are today no longer apply? You can choose fear, or you can choose curiosity. You can continue to do what you're doing, but I would argue that successful leaders, those leaders, they think about, how do I get my team comfortable being uncomfortable? How do I move before consensus? How do I align my teams around a clear vision for the future? What are my consumers, the fans, what are they saying? What are they doing? Because these are the kinds of questions that successful leaders ask themselves. Because, again, things are going to continue to change, whether it's cable to digital, digital to streaming, streaming to AI, and who even knows what's next. Technology, obviously, is not stopping, and we are going to constantly be in disruption. And so I ask you to consider, click the next slide, please. Growth creates confidence, and confidence moves markets. And that's what your teams need today. They need the confidence to succeed. They need you to believe. They need you to move early. And I thank you so much for taking time to share my journey with me today. Thank you.